A group of Peruvians say Moscow is luring their loved ones into war by promising them jobs in Russia, but instead sending them to the front lines in Ukraine. They've been demanding answers for weeks outside the Russian embassy in Lima. CNN's Jimena de la Cuarentena has more details.
When Norma watched her son board a flight to Russia, she believed he was taking on a job as a military cook. The 31-year-old Peruvian had answered an online job ad promising good pay, Russian citizenship, and worked far from the front lines. But once, when he arrived, she says he was handed military gear and sent to fight in Ukraine. This was the last time she ever heard from him. We are not publishing Norma's full name or that of her son to help protect them from possible retaliation.
I have faith in God, but it's been 2 months and 8 days. My faith is shaking, but I keep saying to myself, I have to stay strong.
Norma isn't alone. Dozens of Peruvian families say their loved ones were recruited through misleading job offers and ended up fighting in a deadly war. CNN reached out to the Russian Minister of Defense for comments. The Peruvian government has made hundreds of formal requests to Moscow seeking information about the recruits, while authorities are investigating the local recruiters in a possible human trafficking case. Several Peruvian recruits told CNN they were connected to Russian contacts through Pocho Wilson Pinto Peña, a reserve officer in the Peruvian military.
Regarding the alleged crimes, I've seen mentions of human trafficking, which is absurd. It is absurd. In my case, I am not involved in human trafficking in any way because I am an honest, straightforward, sincere, and highly professional man.
Pinto denies recruiting soldiers. He says he only passed along the contact details of another Peruvian recruiter in Russia, whom he refused to identify, and warned the men they could end up in combat. His name does not appear on any of the Russian recruitment contracts reviewed by CNN.
Initially, he told me he needed personnel for work there, but he didn't specify exactly what. However, since the country is in conflict, and speaking as a military man myself, if I'm being taken to such a country, I naturally know where I'm going.
But there is a difference between being in a war zone, guarding people at the embassy or a similar location, and actually fighting in the front lines.
He told me they would be Russian military personnel, that they would wear the uniform and work as soldiers. He didn't say they were going to work in a shop or a factory.
For Norma and many other families, the investigation offers little comfort. They are still waiting for the same thing they have hoped for since the day their loved ones left a call saying they're coming home.
In Paris, 500 soldiers, including 25 from Ukraine, marched down what is, of course, the famous Champs-Élysées to mark France's Bastille Day this July the 14th. The annual national parade comes a day after a number of leaders gathered in Paris for what's known as the Coalition of the Willing Summit, Western allies of Ukraine announcing a new air defense coalition to help Kyiv thwart ballistic missile attacks from Russia. Well, CNN's Claire Sebastian has more from London. A big show of force in Paris, coming just as Ukraine faces another overnight barrage from Russia. What's the latest?
Yeah, Becky, there was that very overt show of force in Paris. As you see, a show of force and unity. President Macron, of course, using the Bastille Day celebrations to showcase Europe's sort of increasing resolve to take charge of its own defense amid the US, of course, stepping back. But amid that, Ukraine facing what it said was its fifth assault by Russia involving ballistic missiles this month alone. So the frequency of that does seem to be going up. Now, it was able to avert, shoot down or suppress 5 out of the 8 ballistic missiles used, according to the Air Force. It has not been able to do so in some of the recent attacks. So what we're in now is a race against time. Ukraine and its allies racing to beef up Ukraine's defenses as it's clear that Russia is in escalation mode. On Monday, they announced this anti-ballistic missile coalition. The core of that is to come together, Ukraine and its allies, to build what would be a cheaper alternative, a cheaper European alternative to the Patriot system. President Zelensky has also called for a winter air defense package involving some 300 Patriot interceptors. That is a huge number, especially given that the effective collapse of the ceasefire with Iran will put even more strain on US stockpiles. So this really is a race against time. And I think, look, the sort of concentrating the minds around Ukraine, putting forward this package to you know, what it says would be to survive what will be its 5th winter at war. And all the while we see from Russia signals that it's not backing down from its maximalist goals and that it is in the mood to escalate here. Becky.
Yeah, Marco Rubio, I note, at NATO, making it very clear, and one assumes he's speaking on behalf of the administration. He was asked to speak in a press conference by Donald Trump after a question from one of the reporters about how the US perceived Ukraine's stepping up of attacks on Russia. And Rubio said that what he effectively saw was a real change in the sort of paradigm, the suggestion being that Ukraine really has got an upper hand, if not the upper hand at this point. We've seen Ukraine stepping up again with attacks on Russia. What's the Kremlin saying at this point?
Yeah, so as I said, the Kremlin is not giving any signal that it's willing to back down from its maximalist goals. We had the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov out today railing against sanctions. We hear repeated labeling of Ukraine as a terrorist state for its attacks on Russian soil. President Putin actually, in what seemed to be more off-the-cuff comments on Monday, said that Russia would continue to respond proportionally to any Ukrainian attacks on Russian soil. And he said, and I quote, that the enemy, he said, I will continue to feel it going forward on an ever-increasing scale. So there's more evidence, of course, of the whole idea that Russia is in this sort of escalatory mode. And, of course, escalation on both sides. We're seeing on many occasions, and last night being one of those, that the number of Ukrainian drones heading towards Russian territory exceeds the number of Russian drones heading towards Ukrainian territory. Ukraine is making an impact in terms of the oil industry. We now see an uptick in strikes on tankers in the Azov Sea. That is not only a key oil route, but also a key route for Russian grain. So it is having an impact, and that may be playing into this Russian mood of escalation. They may be feeling that Ukrainian attacks are not only hitting their war budget, but also potentially the public mood, shortening their window to meet those goals militarily, if indeed they are able to do that, Becky.